You are tuned into Mostly Humans. The opinions and views shared by the hosts of this podcast are uniquely their own and do not reflect the view or opinions of the companies they work for. P.S. Don't sue or fire us. Thanks so much. Now let's get into the episode.
And then I feel like I've been like negative Ned. No. And I'm not just saying don't come join Agentic because I want all the Agentic for myself. Let me just rattle off a couple quick pros that I think without getting into too much detail, just so people don't think that I'm just like the worst guy.
All right. Welcome back to Mostly Humans, an AI and business podcast for everyone. We break down complex topics and the latest in AI to benefit you, the everyday person, and help showcase how these tools can impact your business operations today. And that actually ties directly into today, where we're going to be talking about AI businesses themselves and what that's like. But before we dive into that, how was your week, Matt?
It was a great week. It was since I've spoken to you last, I think I was in San Francisco, then I went to Vegas. Then you went to Vegas. How was your experience there?
It was good. I like Vegas. It was it was a week is a long time to be there. So that was a long time. But, it was good. It was a productive week. Some of that we can talk about as we get into what it's actually like to work for an AI company, because there was a lot of good meetings of the minds happening from my trip. But it was. Were you there for the whole week, or was it a shortened?
Almost
time?
a week. Yeah, it's probably worth mentioning to the listeners that like neither of us were there for fun. Even though work is fun, don't get me wrong. Don't, as the disclaimer says, don't fire us. But neither of us were there for pleasure, as they say. We were there for work. It was my first time ever being in town, which I don't think is a surprise to many because of my whole lack of being a fun person and Vegas being a fun place. But we stayed at Mandalay Bay Hotel and Resort.
That's so funny. We were at Mandalay Bay too. We literally were passing ships in the night, like one week apart in the same place.
Okay, so you saw it. So super cool place, like beautiful. Like even when you just pull up to the hotel, like a little roundabout where the taxis and Ubers let out, I was like blown away. And then I walked into the lobby and I was like, wow, this place is crazy. It's got like 30-foot ceilings. Really impressed. I have one issue with this place though. They have all these amazing pools. Do pools need to have fake sand near them? Arguably not, but I'll leave that alone. I don't know how you felt about the gym situation. The gym situation was no bueno.
It was rough, yeah.
So
it was
did
like
you
a
go
dungeon.
To that? Yeah, you went to the tiny. Okay, so but I don't know if you looked into this. There is a beautiful gym there. Did you learn about this?
Yes. So I went to the beautiful spa gym the first day. And then I basically, because it's like for anybody listening who hasn't experienced this, there's apparently 3 gyms on site. There's one that's like a crypt. You walk in, it's dark. Everybody's upset. Like it's just it's a very scary place.
So bad.
And so you're like, ooh, that's tough. And then there's apparently a gym. So in Mandalay, there's a W attached to it, and there's also a Four Seasons attached to it. So the Mandalay Bay itself is like it's an older hotel. It used to be really cool because that's where all the UFC fights were back in the day. But then everything kind of moved. So, but yeah, that gym was sketchy. There's a gym in the W that's like, I need a GPS to get to, and I wasn't confident. And then there's a gym in the spa that you have to pay like a fee to use. But that gym was actually kind of nice. The spa gym was nice.
Yes, but here's the problem. When you're there for a conference and you have to get up early, the spa doesn't open until 7. So my options were, I didn't know about this W one, so good to know for the next time. Hopefully a listener would prevent them some agony. I was fired up. I sent a text message with a YouTube video of the Mandalay Bay gym to my coworker because I know she's always like frustrated with hotel gyms as well. I was excited. There's a great YouTube video. I was like, wow, this is going to be great. It's not going to be terrible. So I get up really early, got the pre-workout going. And nothing is worse. You don't want to be frustrated on pre-workout is my experience.
No, that's tough.
So I get down there and I can't get in. So I got in the first day because the first day we arrived at like 10. We were all traveling. We weren't doing anything. So I got in. I was like, wow, it's going to be a great week. Then I get there, I'm knocking, 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 no one there. I'm walking around the outside windows looking in. Is anybody in there? And then I look it up online. It doesn't open until 7. So then I went to the dungeon and there was nothing. It was so bad. Like,
So bad.
and it was so many people. I'm sure that was your experience too. And it's like, if you're going to have this beautiful gym and charge people to go in it, I'm happy to pay. Out of pocket, don't care. But you gotta open before 7.
Yeah, make sure it's open. Exactly.
The
Yeah.
reason the dungeon is probably so crowded is because everybody's like, well, I can't get in the other one, even though I would pay to get in. So other than that, that place was really cool. The pools and stuff, the weather. I was impressed with Vegas. It was very clean city as I walked around. Like, I was walking around early in the morning too, when sometimes cities can be kind of rough in the early morning. I was really impressed. So would go back for sure. Maybe for like a football game or something, because the rest of the festivities are not for me.
Yeah. The stadium there is incredible. There's a lot of, there's a lot of cool stuff. Like the T-Mobile Arena where all the fights are now is really nice. But yeah, Mandalay is funny because it's like, it's one of the now older hotels and it's kind of at the far end of the strip. But anyways, I love Vegas. It's a fun place. A week is too long, but it's a fun place.
I have one quick question for you before we get into
Yes.
business here.
Okay.
I'm going to tap into your previous business. Are you a certified trainer? I never asked you this.
Yeah. So I have a lot of certifications. I think many of them are lapsing now. But
you, at one point, someone blessed you and said, you know stuff.
yeah, somebody somewhere said, hey, yes, you know things.
Okay. So right when I got sick in Vegas at the conference, unfortunately. So I came back, I was sick and I threw out my back. So I was down for the count. So it did not work out for a week. I just started ramping back up this week. And there's about 8 or 9 days where I wasn't in the gym. So then when I started working out again, it's all it takes for me. The delayed onset muscle soreness is like pretty bad. Now I've had this debate, and normally I just would have, right after this podcast, just gone to the gym this morning here on Saturday. But I'm going to ask the expert. I'm like sore to the touch type of thing. Like if I go like that area is sore. So it's just because with my body, if I don't work out for like a week or whatever, all of a sudden it's like I never worked out before in my life. I have one more workout on the schedule for today that will involve working out the sore muscles. Is it a bad idea when you take some time off and you have that extra soreness to work through it, or should I work through it?
It's nuanced because it's not necessarily a bad idea. What I usually tell people is start your warm up and start moving. And if things start to feel better as you warm up, it's usually a good indicator that you can do whatever it is given at a lighter load or maybe lower rep count. If as you're warming up, things don't change and it still feels terrible, I would adjust and either do something different or maybe just like move your body, stretch, whatever. But yeah, it's the warm up will indicate if you can actually do things in a way that won't destroy you.
Okay, cool. I love it. Thank you for the advice. And I bet there's a lot of people listening to this who wonder the same thing because like life gets in the way. Sometimes you don't go for a while and then you go back in with gusto like I did. And then you wake up the next couple of days and you're like, wow, everything hurts as if I've never touched a weight before. You go through these mental gymnastics. Should I go still? I'm willing to go, but is it the right thing, the wrong thing? We have settled that debate. You go still, try, warm up. And if you start to feel like you're not so much the Tin Man and you got a little bit of oil and you're starting to feel okay, then you can let it rip. If you still feel lousy after a warm up, call it. All right, cool. So we are talking today about what it's like to work for AI native companies. And AI native meaning non-LLM. But like maybe let's start, I'll throw it to you. Can you just for our listeners like talk about what's the difference between like an LLM and the hyperscalers and AI native companies built on LLMs?
Yeah. So I think there's a misconception that anybody working in it, well, actually, let's take a step back. So AI native versus AI adjacent or whatever. The way that I define an AI native company is a company that was built in this new age of LLMs. And so they are architected to leverage this new technology from the outset versus a lot of companies are doing things in AI now. And what they're essentially doing is they're adding AI functionality to some pre-existing software stack. So they've built a product, they have some type of software stack that they've been selling, and now they are adding AI functionality to it, but they weren't built with leveraging LLMs as the core use case for whatever it is that they're leveraging them for. Now, in terms of, actual large language models or companies like OpenAI, Anthropic, the people who are building models, or even these research labs who are building other models and AI native companies, most AI native companies are not actually training models or building large language models. So we've talked about ChatGPT and Claude through Anthropic. So OpenAI or Anthropic, their job is to make their models better, and they are actually building these LLMs that are the kind of foundational layer to a lot of these other AI companies. Most AI companies are delivering some outcome, to go back to what you were talking about previously, right? Focusing on delivering some outcome. And they're not actually creating a model. They're leveraging an existing model and creating some functionality around it. But those are two very different pursuits. I don't know how that jives with your definition, but that's how I would define it.
Yeah, leave it to me to be the oversimplification guy. The way I understand it in my pea brain that we've talked about many times is AI native means if GPT-5 or Claude, not Claude, Anthropic's LLM or Gemini was turned off tomorrow, my company would be in a bad spot. No large language model, literally no product for me at all to speak of. Whereas, I think a lot of people have been using call recorders for a really long time now. Those have been popular the last 4 or 5 years. If you're on a Zoom call, you record the call, and there's a transcription of everything that everybody said, even before large language models were popular. Well, now, what all of those companies do is they bolted on a large language model. These are not AI native companies. So let's say I have a call recorder company. We've always been recording calls. We've always had a transcript. But now I bolt on a large language model feature that's not the whole core product that lets you ask questions about what happened on the call. Hey, what was the time the customer told me they wanted to meet again? And you can ask that question of the transcript. That's an AI feature bolted onto a really nice software product that's just classic software. That's not AI native. Whereas Justin and I both work for companies that if the large language models were shut down by the government tomorrow, we'd be like, well, got to pack it up because there's no product here. Everything that we have built is around the functionality of what these large language models can do. And AI native companies basically build products to get people their desired business outcome from the large language model, because the large language model on its own can't do that. So you guys probably have hundreds of thousands of lines of code written all around taking the LLM that is very powerful and flexible and doing a very particular enterprise business task very, very well.
Yes. And I think it's, when you're thinking about this stuff, there's this phrase that goes around that's just like, oh, that's just a ChatGPT wrapper, or it's just whatever. And so I think that's kind of been the talk track that some of these, I don't even want to call them legacy tech companies, but just for distinguishing between pre-LLM and AI native, these legacy tech companies, that's kind of been their way to take a shot at these companies that were built as AI native, because they're like, oh, they're just a wrapper on top of GPT or whatever. But that wrapper is actually the entire business value. And the wrapper doesn't just mean, oh yeah, we, put a UI on top of ChatGPT and called it a day. There are companies doing that, which for those of you who are considering a career in AI, I would try to poke some holes in the product a little bit and ask these questions. But what goes into the wrapper is all of the enterprise security, data structure, all of the usability, all of the functionality. And in terms of a lot of AI native companies, I know what we do is we're using the LLM as kind of the last leg of the mile, but there's a substantial amount of stuff that happens in the product prior to, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever doing anything. And that's my experience with AI native companies that are actually building, truly valuable software, is that, yes, they're leveraging the LLM, but there's a lot of stuff that still happens prior to that. And I know your company is much the same way.
Yeah. I mean, so this is a great launching point for us too, right? So we've now talked about like what are the software companies that have bolted on AI solutions and new features, and pretty much every company has. Like even like MyFitnessPal. If I take a picture of my food, it's probably like looking at using GPT-4o to analyze the dish and be like, that looks like 6 ounces of eggs. Well, MyFitnessPal is still a really valuable tool for what it's there for fitness tracking, and food tracking, and all that kind of stuff. And they've added on an AI feature, as pretty much everyone has. And then we said that the AI native companies are the companies where the entire product is built around the LLM from the beginning. There was no product before LLMs. Cool. When people say the wrapper thing, that is like, it's always sent with a shot, like you said. And what's really funny about that is that that's like, that's like on-premise mainframe software in like the early 90s saying about cloud providers, well, they're really just an internet wrapper,
Yeah.
Trying to make mainframe on-prem stuff still work. And for those who don't know what I'm talking about, I'm alluding to like software companies before we all access them through high-speed internet. A lot of major software companies would come to your business and like literally build like a server in your business, like in a closet.
Yeah.
And, they'd spend like 6 months building the physical hardware that the software would run on and putting it inside of your location. And then I imagine some of them were like, Siebel, the old CRM that was super successful before Salesforce, would probably say about Salesforce, it's really just like an internet wrapper. Like it's nothing, there's nothing really there. There's no hardware. It's like, I don't care. I don't care if there's hardware. I can now access my data from anywhere. It's fully secure. It saves me a ton of money. I'm not locked into this vendor forever because I don't have their servers in my closet. Sorry, Siebel, Salesforce sounds pretty good.
Yes. And now there's a lot more in the age of AI. I don't want to say that the Salesforces of the world will go away, but all of that complexity in a lot of legacy software now is starting to be, replaced, which we can get into, but sorry to interrupt you.
No, all good. So yeah, and like I think companies like Salesforce have actually done an excellent job of making the pivot and recognizing that they need to be as AI native I think they are, frankly. They are trying to be as AI native as they possibly can while still having one of the world's largest install bases, which means like customers, like the amount of footprint of customers that they have, who they sold this legacy thing to. So they have to keep up with that. They have commitments there. They probably have contracts that run for the next 5 years that were signed before ChatGPT came out. So they're going to have to maintain all that. But they are one of the ones doing a nice job of that. But let's focus more on us. I think a lot of the listeners, because we got to make it about us, like me, especially about
naturally.
me.
Yeah, naturally.
Got to make this about me. If you've listened before, like very self-centered action going on here. But in all seriousness, like a lot of the listeners that we have, just based on our networks that we share this with, are in software and their companies are doing things with AI now. But a lot of people that talk to me off the record are like, hey, what's it like to work for an AI native company? Are you guys just a wrapper? Because they've been trained at their company to call solutions like that wrappers and all that kind of stuff. So I want to first throw it to you. I think if you are in AI, well, let's say, especially in agentic AI, you're in agentic AI, so am I. See our previous episodes, go look in our catalog, like episodes 1 through 3, we talk about what's the difference. If you're in agentic AI, which you and I are, there is no us without the legacy software systems because we play with them. We basically plug into them and act with them like humans would. That's the first thing that I think is a really interesting, eye-opening, rude awakening type of thing for a lot of people who have worked for software companies. Can you talk about what is the difference between somebody who, like, let's say they work for a CRM company or they work for an HR software company? What's the difference between working for one of those companies where you kind of like sell the thing you log into versus being in an agentic AI native company?
Yeah. It's a substantially harder game. And there's two places I'll take this, right? One is if you control everything, meaning you control the bouncer at the front of the club, you control the club, you control all the things that are going on, you can very easily build an end-to-end experience that has few variables, that is controlled, where you know where people are going to click and navigate. And bugs still happen in software, as we've all experienced, or companies will release an update that breaks something else. But the reality is you're controlling the entire ecosystem. And so you can essentially build a product that works very well, very reliably, and you control your own fate. So if you release a bug, cool, you fix your own bug. It's very easy to figure out where things went wrong. When you are building a system that integrates into all of these software systems, unfortunately, you don't control most of the sandboxes that you're playing in. And so you have to build your product to be flexible. But what that also means is the reality is, as these other companies update their software, you need to make sure that it doesn't break the solution that you've already built. And AI tooling makes it easier to be flexible, which is one of the cool things. And I mean, I guess in a little bit, I'll kind of get into what I think is really cool about being in an AI native company and how it's a completely different way of thinking about business. But the reality is you don't control all the sandboxes. And so you need to be very careful and be very diligent when you're integrating with other systems to make sure that you're staying on top of their releases, so you know how things are going to work. And you have to be able to look a little bit further ahead into the future, I think, to anticipate where things are going. If your whole game is integrating with other systems to do these agentic actions.
Yeah, that's a really good explanation. I think if you worked for a CRM company or an HR software company or a sales software company, which those are three huge avenues. I bet like 75% of the people that are in software that are listening to this podcast work for somebody that does one of the three of those. An applicant tracking system where, you screen candidates, all that kind of stuff. Like, you control everything, as Justin just alluded to. And that matters a lot, right? It's like, if you were going to build a house, and there's a GC for a reason, but that's the person that kind of oversees the entire project. If the GC gets called in after the foundation is laid and the framing's already done and the drywall's up, so they can't see where the pipes are, they can't see where the electrical is, and they're getting asked to do some pretty early construction related things, and there's no one with whom they can turn to. There's no blueprints that they can look at to be like, well, what did you build here? What did you do here? It's more tricky, right? Doesn't mean they can't, but it's more tricky. If it was their project from the beginning, they know, oh, actually, we put that cord there, that load-bearing beam is over there, and that pipe actually runs from there to there. A lot less experimentation, a lot less holes you have to cut into the wall to peer in and be like, where is it? Now, it can still get done. We all have people come to our homes that were built by somebody else and have a repair done, right? But it's much, much trickier for those people, especially if they can't get access to blueprints or if things were built not in the most traditional way. Whereas if you've been the person there since day one, you know all about it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a big, big difference. And how does that impact the people that are going to consider working for an AI native company? Well, there's two kinds of people that might be considering working for an AI native company. No disrespect to us, but I don't think there's a lot of NGs listening to this podcast.
Oh, I hope there are some. Please.
I wish that there were, but I drag down the IQ on this podcast quite a bit.
No, not at all.
And I don't think they want to hear me pontificating to them about AI. But let's say if there is an engineer listening to this podcast, put it in the comments and you have blown me away that you are here. But most of the people are kind of on the go-to-market side that would be listening to this podcast and thinking about joining an AI company. What does that mean? That basically means you go on a camera like this in front of customers and you either help them use the product or you talk about the product before they buy it, right? I'll start with the sales side, and then I'd love you to talk about like the implementation side. From the sales side, some things that you would want to be ready for is that you're probably not currently ready for is everybody is going to ask you constantly about, do you integrate with XYZ system? Because you are agentic. And agentic basically means it's kind of like doing human work. And human work, humans use software tools to get jobs done. And in general, if you work for some sort of an agentic company, people are going to ask you if your agent can integrate with and therefore use a lot of the tools that they already have, just like the people that they hire. So today, if a company uses HubSpot and they're going to hire a new sales rep, they don't even ask the sales rep, are you okay with using HubSpot? Is that going to be okay? They just say, hey, yeah, no, we have a CRM. You're going to have to learn how to use it. And the human learns how to use it, even if they're like only ever used Salesforce their whole career. Well, now if they're thinking about hiring an agent to do something in that system, which is HubSpot, then they actually need to ask the agentic company, do you work well with HubSpot? Do you integrate well? And then what happens to the data as that happens? So like, first things first, as a salesperson, full stop, be prepared for tons of questions that you've never received before in your career to this level. Like if you're an applicant tracking system, they might say like, hey, do you integrate with monster.com? Do you integrate with career builder and indeed.com because I'm posting my jobs? Like that's kind of basic integrations. But be prepared for something like you've never seen before, people peppering you with lots of questions about lots of systems. And you need to knowing not just yes or no, do you integrate? This is just as a high level salesperson. You also need to know how you integrate, how deep it goes, how it's maintained, how data remains secure while all this stuff is happening, and how that plays nicely with those systems, AI functionality that they've created. And that's just the very tip of the iceberg, but that's something that's new for a lot of people that are like, oh, I want to go sell agentic because I hear about it in the news a lot. You have to be very, very well technically versed. You can't just learn a pitch and then go start pitching on the phone. It won't work. So how about implementation side or proof of concept side?
Well, so just to echo that, I think if you want to be successful in sales in an AI world, you don't need to be a deep product expert. And I said this on a previous episode, but you need to have a breadth of knowledge about a lot of things. Like you need to at least be technically curious. Because if you think that you're just going to roll in with a deck and say, hey, we have AI, it's amazing, do you want to buy it? That just doesn't work. Because buyers are smarter. And a lot of the companies that are interested in AI, like agentic AI solutions now, are actually early adopters on the curve of technology. And so the people that you're going to be talking to are technically proficient. They are technically versed. They do know about LLMs and how they work. You're typically not going to be selling to buyers who are just oblivious about the technology, right? So listening to this podcast is a good place to start if you're, want to move into sales and AI. But if as a seller, you do need to be able to be armed with knowledge going into those conversations. Now, on the implementation side, the reality is there's no playbook. So if you are the type of person who is entrepreneurial, who's curious, who likes to tinker, then I think it's a great place to be because you are literally building these solutions and you're at the forefront of the technology, right? Because the integration and implementation component of this is all new, uncharted territory. Fortunately, there are tools like MCP that are coming out, but even MCP was built within the last year, right? So this whole protocol that we talked about on a previous episode about how these agents interact, this is all new tech and it's going to continue to change and evolve. I mean, Google just announced an AI native payment process, right? So you have like Stripe that's powering payments for a lot of companies and everything. And Google is literally building a payment protocol in the age of AI agents for how do you actually handle transactions if these agents are talking to each other, whatever. There's all of this framework that's being built while we are, trying to solve this technology. On the implementation front, I have literally been on calls where I have known more about Salesforce than the Salesforce expert that I was talking to at the company that we were integrating with, because you don't just need to know how to implement a solution for Salesforce at one company. You need to be able to deal with the complexity that every company is going to have a custom configuration, especially with something like Salesforce. And a lot of these larger enterprise companies have very customized, deeply entrenched CRMs or technology that have been built and really customized, bespoke for them. So on the implementation side, you need to be able to ask the right questions to figure out what their configuration is like and how these things are set up. So discovery becomes very important. But then you actually have to debug and figure out where the error is coming from or why your integration isn't working. And a lot of that requires deep knowledge of a lot of different software systems, which again is really fun if you like that and you're technically curious. But it is challenging because you need to know a lot about a lot if you are on the implementation side of the house.
Big time. And something that you said, I want to put a really fine point on it. If you have spent most of your career, you're like a mercenary and you got to go from software company to software company. You learn the pitch, you're a salesperson, and then, you do the pitch, you focus on the business value, and you have someone who's like a sales engineer or something that comes in and they help you out. And, you never really learn that much, never get your hands that. And you say, okay, well, the next wave is not SaaS anymore. It's AI or it's agentic or whatever. You're absolutely going to fail as a salesperson in this world if you are willing to change. Now, people are very capable of change, but they have to want to change. So if you don't want to change that and you're like, oh, let me go now align myself with this, I promise that you will fail. And the reason is, as Justin was alluding to, is the buyers are very skeptical. As we talked about in the last podcast, 95% of all AI pilots in the enterprise are failing. That's one. Two, if it's agentic, it requires all these other platforms. So there is not this pitch that you learn. The pitch is how can I, as any agentic provider, learn as much as I can about your current process, your current systems, your configurations of these systems, and figure out how our agents, if that's what we want to call them, can plug into those things, your existing world that you've created for your employees. And every world that every company creates for their employees is different, and figure out how we can plug in and help you drive efficiencies there, with like the 10 to 20% of the stuff that you think AI should be able to handle, so you guys can get back to like much more meaningful stuff and growth and strategy. And it's really important context for people to have. And if you can't have those conversations as early as a discovery call, when you're there by yourself, that 15 to 30-minute call with a potential customer, you're cooked, and you need to know how to talk about that stuff. And as you were alluding to, a lot of the systems that people want to see agents work with are the legacy tech titans, right? Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, Salesforce, Google, like big, huge companies that have massive international presence. They've signed 7 to 8 year software licenses with those companies. Those companies are going nowhere. And as you were alluding to, if you buy Oracle or Salesforce or Workday or whatever it is, all of those platforms are highly configurable. The reason they're so expensive, and the reason global systems integrators and SIs like Accentures and Deloitte, PwC, have an entire business where all they do is just help people deliver the software, is because it's a ball of clay. And it's like, you're an international corporation, you're highly regulated, we're going to set up Salesforce this way. And then we're going to set up SAP this way. And no two of those deployments are ever the same. This is not like consumer software. And a lot of sales reps say to themselves, oh, I know Salesforce. I've used it my whole career. So I could sell an agentic thing if it's tied into Salesforce. No, you know Salesforce as an end user. And then, maybe you work for 6 different companies, and all 6 companies use Salesforce slightly different, and opening up an opportunity in Salesforce was slightly different, and forecasting was a little different, but you learned pretty easy, button clicks. We're talking about creating software machines, agents that plug into highly, highly configured stuff. So it's not like, oh yeah, you just press this button and you integrate us with Salesforce. No, it's not how this stuff works. And I'm not speaking specifically about your company or mine. I'm talking very broad about how
Mhm.
agentic works, right? And if you couldn't have a customer, frankly, open up their Salesforce instance from like the admin side of things. And I'm not saying you need to know what it's like to be a Salesforce admin to sell agentic, but you need to be able to like not be scared about what am I even seeing back here? These click and drag things, these diagrams of how a workflow works and whatever. If you look at that and you say, unless someone holds my hand and takes me through exactly what all of this means, I have no idea what I'm looking at. That's bad. Now, I don't know everything about the back end of Oracle or SAP or ServiceNow or whatever, but if my client opened it up on a discovery call to kind of show me how they have it configured, I need to be able to use deductive reasoning, logic, reading, a little bit of thinking to generally at least understand what I'm looking at to see if our solution could plug in or if we could scope something. And I'm not talking about my product. I'm just talking about agentic in general.
Yeah.
It's almost like I just spent 5 minutes saying, if you want to be an AE in AI native or agentic, you need to have the capabilities of being an SE at your current company. That's
Yeah.
a way faster way of saying that.
Yeah, which is crazy. And if you want to be an SE at an agentic company, it is like our entire SE team at my company is former software engineers or people with development backgrounds. Like
Yep.
we are writing code. It's not just a technical consultative role. To Matt's point, the best AEs are more realistically like that technical consultative role. And I would actually say, we've talked about a lot of the challenges and I'll highlight one more, but then I do want to get into what's actually exciting about working for these companies because
Wait,
there's a lot of upside.
There's upside?
There is a lot of upside.
Okay. I'm just kidding, everybody.
I do think, and actually, before I get into all the fun upside of this, I'd love your opinion on this statement. My belief is if you have spent time as like a technical consultant at some company, or you've done consulting with to a technical degree, whether it's the Accentures of the world or whatever, I actually think you could have a tremendously successful career selling agentic AI solutions and actually probably make a tremendous amount of money if you're coming into it with that level of background and knowledge. And I actually think those types of individuals would make phenomenal salespeople in an AI world, but I'd love for you to validate or disprove that real quick.
I love that. I never thought about that. And you couldn't be more right. You could not be more right. So the global systems integrators, for those who don't know, these are like the biggest companies in the world that have multi-billion dollar practices and tens of thousands of employees who spend their time strategizing with large enterprises about what do you want to do with software and when do you want to go live with it and what are the implications and what other tools do you have, and they come in and they do all the setting up and all the onboarding and the connecting and they train your staff. And you're so right, Justin, because they are forced to learn about companies' unique business processes and their systems and how they want to configure those systems. And all they sell is their ability to service everybody else's software. So I never thought about it till right now, but I have a suspicion you are absolutely correct. That if you are coming from the consulting SI world, you probably would crush in AI because it's very similar.
And it's an opportunity for anybody who's maybe, I don't want to say bored, maybe frustrated with your current career. If you fit that profile, run, don't walk to a sales opportunity at a fast growing AI startup, because the upside there is tremendous, both from like an equity ownership standpoint and from just like a deal size standpoint and the ability to do that. So that's my advice to anybody listening who fits that mold. The one other challenge that I would say is a lot of companies want us to solve their problem in the same way that they've solved it, but using AI. And so the thing that I find myself doing a lot is actually consulting companies and saying, I understand that you have this workflow that exists now and you have this way that you think you want to do things, but I encourage you to think about it differently because, and that leads me into what I'm most excited about working for an agentic AI company, is the way that we will do these things today and in the future is completely different. Meaning, because the LLMs are flexible, we've talked about, agentic actions, querying APIs and doing things in other systems. That becomes way more flexible with AI tools because you don't need to be as explicit. The way that we build API integrations at my company is it's pulling information from the context of the conversation. So if you're taking some action in Salesforce and you're saying, oh, I need to change this record to this and I want to pull this value, as long as the LLM can deduce from what you're saying kind of what you want to do, even if you have typos, even if you call something the wrong thing, but a human could figure out what you're saying, it can actually successfully take that action on your behalf and query those systems. So the really exciting thing is it's way more flexible now. You don't have to be super rigid. You don't have to think about every scenario. I know how you feel about this, but you don't need to build if-then statements for every possible outcome. You can generally describe what you want the end result to be, and these tools are powerful enough to figure out how to get there. And we talked about when we defined what agents are. Basically, think of these tools like having a really smart and capable employee that you would trust with a task, even if that task is somewhat ambiguous, to figure it out somehow. And so you end up getting a lot more flexibility in the way that you do things. And so, if you're working in agentic AI and you're trying to sell into these software companies that are forward thinking, that want to start to embrace this technology, I think I keep going back to your point about being outcomes focused. And you were talking about this in terms of for personal career development. But I think if you're working in this industry and you're trying to sell these products, is speaking more to outcomes than to the specific process to get there, because most of the companies you're going to be speaking with don't have the same level of understanding of how these systems work. They get it to some degree and they know what LLMs are, but it's going to be your job to actually show them why the way that they think they want to solve the problem today is actually better solved with this completely different process because these tools are more powerful.
So you view it as like this pure upside because like you love this stuff, and I love it too. But for me, I still put it in like it makes it tricky to work for an agentic company side of thing.
Oh, it's not easy. There's upside. It's tricky. It's tricky, but there is upside.
Yeah, the upside is you can deliver better outcomes for your client than they've ever had from anything else. We talked a little bit in the past about like probabilistic versus deterministic. So large language models and all things that we view as generative AI is nothing more than a series of probabilities. So even if you built the thing exactly the right way and you tested it 100 times and it always worked really good, exactly how you want it, on 101, it might do something that it's never done before. And that's a result of the large language model being a probability. The probabilities of, there being like an earthquake when you walk outside are very, very low, no matter where you are in the world. Even if it's a place that's prone to earthquakes, it's very low still. Like you can think about all the time you spend walking around the earth, right? But there still is a probability that there could be a tremor or an earthquake where you are, right? It's always a probability. So with software, up until current state, generative AI, it wasn't that way. It was their rules were built in a very rigid way, and there would never be a tremor or an earthquake. There is no probability of the thing doing this, then this, right? I think a great way for people to understand it, if they need an analogy, is remember back in the day when you type in a password, and people used to ask each other, like, is it caps sensitive? Like,
Yep,
right?
Yep.
So like, we used to type in passwords, and now they are all caps sensitive because we need the passwords to be as secure as possible. But in the early days of passwords, there was two types of passwords. You could type in like QWERTY was my password, like QWERTY123, and it would get me into the system. Or if it was cap sensitive and I had caps locks on, it wouldn't, right? If it was cap sensitive, that means it needs to be the exact same input every time. So if it was all caps, then it had to be all caps. That's determinism. No deviation whatsoever. for lack of a better analogy, large language models, generative AI, are like passwords that you could make the Q capital, the W not capital, the E capital, the R lowercase, and so on and so forth. And it's still, if it's QWERTY123, you're still going to get in. It's not going
And
to
for
be
passwords, that's very bad.
Yeah. Yeah. So the world has changed, and now it's very much deterministic again in passwords. But it helps us understand that, like, for example, like let's say if I said to Justin, we love our cooking examples here. All right, step one is put oil on the pan. And large language models, Justin knows, okay, he's going to open the cabinet. He's going to pick the oil that he wants. And it's not going to be a seed oil.
Never.
But it could be a seed oil if he so chose. And that's the point, right? But in a deterministic world, I would say first step is oil the pan. And Justin would go, I can't move forward because you didn't say where the cabinet is and how to open it and on what shelf and on what type of oil. So you need to build a rule that says, first, raise your right arm here, then grab handle, then pull out, then look second shelf, then look at olive oil, not seed oil, like then grab, then spray. And if you didn't give all those steps in traditional software, it would fall down. Now, large language models, AI native companies allow you to say, first step is put oil in the pan. So you can skip all that junk that you used to have to build. And a lot of you still have to build at the companies you work for, which is cool. But the con is, and what you need to be prepared for, is that because you can skip all those steps and the LLM goes, no, you probably want olive oil and it's probably up there somewhere. I'm going to grab it. Problem is that also means that on time 101, the software doesn't behave exactly the way the client wanted. Whereas if you have been selling traditional software, it behaves exactly the way you want it 100 out of 100 times. But that also means it can't have these delightful outcomes that you never expected. So it's the gift and the curse.
Yep. And I think it's important to think about how we build guardrails in an AI world. I'm sure your company's thinking about this. My company's thinking about this. And I think for the listeners, if you are considering these career pivots or joining an AI company, these are questions that they need to think about if the plan is to sell to enterprise companies and actually have longevity in the industry, because the reality is determinism is not going away. And so you need to find ways to build guardrails around your product such that you can still leverage the creativity of LLMs, because they do lead to those delightful outcomes, as you alluded to. But it's what happens in terms of the system architecture and plumbing before the LLM does its magic that allows you to actually ensure security, consistency, predictability, in the ways that you want that. And that becomes another challenge, right? If you're selling or building in AI, these are really hard problems to solve. And the reality is nobody has figured out the best way to solve these problems yet. A lot of people are doing pretty good things, but there isn't like a clear winner or a clear approach that works best yet. And the question of how do you handle determinism in AI tools, like this is something that is an ongoing challenge. I think, to go back to what I think makes somebody well suited for this industry is you kind of have to be an LLM human, meaning you have to be given ambiguous instructions and be able to create delightful outcomes. Like if you want to be successful in this industry, you need to be the type of person where if you're given guidelines, they can be somewhat ambiguous and that doesn't scare you. Like you don't need somebody to tell you, I need you to do exactly steps 1 through 10. And if you miss any of those steps, then it's a problem. You need to be able to maybe have a couple steps missing, or maybe have the goal be a little bit unclear. And it's like, hey, the goal is for us to build this solution for this piece of software. And you need to be a key part of that. But if ambiguity scares you, I don't think that you would enjoy working in this industry, at least not now. Maybe downstream, as we figure out more consistent solutions to some of these problems, that would change. But I think, if you are the type of person who struggles with ambiguity, I'm not saying that you're not capable of working for an agentic AI company, but I wouldn't recommend that you make that leap now, or at
Yeah.
least that's my belief.
I think this is a really, we're kind of closing in on a good place to stop. But I think it's a really good takeaway for people. A lot of us say, I want to work for this new hot like AI company and this startup, and this world of AI is exploding, all that kind of stuff. The reason that the world of AI is exploding so much is because it is going to be it's like a different being this is like the equivalent of like the aliens coming. But they're peaceful and they want to work with us, and they're nice and they're awesome and they're
They're cool
collaborative.
aliens.
Yeah, but we got to work with them now, and it's going to impact everything, which means you don't have to jump in right now to be a part of it. It's not like, oh, I'm picking software instead of electrical engineering as a career path. Like AI is here to stay. By listening to this podcast, by staying ready on this stuff and playing around with the tools that are free, you're going to be way more relevant than 99% of the people who fear it. Right? But if you are considering a career in generative AI agents, this is my third AI agent stop in my career. And you want playbooks, you do well with playbooks. You're like, hey, what's the knowledge base? Or where's our documentation on how to do that? Of course, every company should have a couple things written down, but there is no rule book because there is no rule engine in this stuff, really. So if you say like, I need to know how to set up a demo, like where's like a Google Doc or something that shows me how to set up the demo, like step by step by step by step, or to make the bot do this, or to make the agent do this type of thing in Workday or whatever it might be. If you are looking for that, it is not going to exist at these companies. And you need to ask yourself, does that make you wildly uncomfortable? Like, forget about the idea, like the allure of the company. You're at your computer by yourself. If you're working from home, there's no one you could tap on the shoulder. Does that make you super uncomfortable? Or are you willing to just grab that machete and start carving out a path? Sometimes it's uncomfortable, even as a machete wielder myself, just like Justin. Like, even for me, sometimes I'm like, I really wish I had someone to talk to. But even if I did, you know what? They don't have the answer, because these are probabilistic tools and systems, and we have to experiment to see how they're going to behave. So it's not the right time if you're not comfortable with that. You really like, just teach me what works and I'll do what works. That doesn't fly in any agentic. And then I feel like I've been like negative Ned. No. And I'm not just saying don't come join agentic because I want all the agentic for myself. Let me just rattle off a couple of quick pros that I think without getting into too much detail, just so people don't think that I'm just like the worst guy. So one, I love telling people that I work in AI when they ask me what I do for my career. Because I think a lot of the things we talked about today are implied. That I'm an experimenter, that I'm dangerous with technology, that I don't fear technology, and I want to wield this stuff for good. I love talking to all of the enterprises globally that I get to speak to at all these different companies I've worked for, and find out, get a front row seat by talking to them. Of course, it's under NDA, and that's why we don't talk about those things on these podcasts, and there's no specifics here. But I love learning from the biggest companies in the world, companies that I idolize, or companies that have a big impact on society or culture or technology, and how are they thinking about it? Because like the things they're talking to us about now are going to be playing out in like 2 or 3 years. I like that I get to work with like-minded people who are also wired that way with technology. I like that you get to interface with engineers now more than you ever have if you work for an AI company, because there's a lot of learning happening together. The engineers are like, well, what was your experience with our practice? Oh, I didn't expect it was going to do that, because they didn't build a specific rule for it. So those are just some of the highlights for me. As far as like, is there like amazing game-changing income to be made in AI versus traditional software? I'd actually say there's probably more income to be made in traditional software right now, because of like the MIT type of stuff and the hesitation, and how there's a lot of proving that needs to go on. So there's a lot of free POCs and pilots and all that kind of stuff going on as trust is being built. I think like if you're selling an HCM right now and you got a good thing going on, don't just think as AI is some gold rush, you're going to go crush it over there. Doing AI, you might actually be better off in that regard. Of course, like we all have bills to pay, but AI for me is not about money. I'd rather be stimulating my brain this way. Hopefully, you hope that one day that it equates to much more money. But I don't think it's that everyone who's working in AI is making wealth that people are not in traditional software. I actually think it might be the opposite for current state.
Yeah. And I think you hear about the, the Meta poaching the researchers or whatever. I think the money's to be made, on the research and development side, on the people who are actually like building the underpinnings of this now. But if we're talking about go to market, I agree. I think if you are wired for creativity, if you like puzzles, if you like solving problems, if you're the type of person who, obsesses over finding a solution to something because it just, gets your gears turning and you can't turn your brain off. I mean, that's the type of person I've always been. And I love where I am, and I couldn't imagine working in a different industry right now. I do think that if you're that type of person and you want to make the leap, I think money is to be made downstream. I think as this technology continues to evolve, you will put yourself in a very good position if you're considering making this leap. If you are that type of person, if you do want to work with people like that, I think now is definitely the time for those people. But really just to tie it up with a bow, I think to give yourself the best chance of success, if you want to work for a true AI native company, understand that the way that these companies are being built is different because they're architected with this new technology at their core. So processes are different. User experience is different. The way that we're thinking about, traditional UI, like, do you even need an interface where you click around if all you have to do is talk to it, right? These are fundamental things that we're thinking about in the industry. But if you're thinking of making the leap, just to kind of tie up some of the things we said, you have to be well-versed. You have to be technologically curious. You can't just show up with a deck and a smile and sell these products, because people are going to ask really challenging questions. And you don't have to have all the answers, but you have to be able to understand what they're asking so that you can bring in the right resources on these calls so that you can get them the answers to their questions. But on the flip side, people will see right through BS. So if you don't know this stuff, don't try to pretend that you do, because I've seen that go very poorly on calls as well. And so, just know that as this tech changes, as, you're considering moving into this field, you do need to spend time reading, researching. If checking OpenAI's blog and seeing what they built next doesn't excite you at all, I don't think this is probably the right place to be yet. But on the flip side, if it does, if you find yourself reading AI news and getting really excited and you think the technology is super cool, then, hopefully you're like Matt and I, and you find a good home for that. And for any of our listeners who are considering making this pivot, if you are that type of person, by all means, reach out to us, comment, find us on LinkedIn or whatever. We're always happy to share our experience and, at least speaking for myself, point you in the right direction if that's the move you're looking to make.
Yeah. Well, I'll wrap up on my side just saying, because you triggered something for me that's important, is like, I used to say on sales calls, this is a real thing. I used to say on sales calls, well, of course, because the training only goes back to 2021. That's a statement I used to say. That's no longer true. I used to say on sales calls regarding AI agents, well, that's because the LLM doesn't know what today's date is. That's no longer true. I used to say on sales calls, well, large language models are actually traditionally very poor at math. That is no longer true. I used to say on sales calls, well, that's because we can't cite where the training came from. That is no longer true. Why am I bringing that up? Those are just 4 tiny examples that no one at work taught me. That if I said those to tomorrow on a call, I'm looking really silly if my buyer is at all educated on AI, right? And I had to learn that on my own by filling my social media feed and my podcast feed with everything AI. And I'm always trying to absorb this knowledge. It changes every single day what's going down, right? That's like if I said to if a customer said, are you guys training your own model? I'm like, no, that's obviously extremely cost prohibitive. There's no way we could do that. Like, we don't have billions of dollars. Not true. DeepSeek disproved that. No one at work stopped me and said, hey guys, I'm going to train you. LLMs are good at math now. DeepSeek trained a model for $6.9 million. Like, no one's going to stop and teach you that. Like, the expectation of you, if you're going to work for an AI native company, is that you're keeping tabs on all things AI. Whereas in your current role, maybe you guys get like enablement on like how things have changed, like once a quarter or like every half a year. hey guys, some new regulations, hey, some new features, and they train you up and they teach you, and just this is what you say now. It's not like that here. But I also like that. I think that's a pro. Like, I love how, like, I don't go up there every day and I'm not like reading the same lines off of a page. It's like, I got to use dynamic critical thinking. And if you sometimes find your current job to be too monotonous, then you might like AI because it changes every day. So I'll leave with that, but I do want to echo what you said. Like, reach out to us. If you're listening to this podcast, reach out. We're glad to make introductions for you where we can, or help you out with some information.
Yeah. And if you do come into AI, welcome to the jungle. It's a wild ride, but I wouldn't be anywhere else. And if that sounds like you, definitely reach out to us. But as always, thank you so much for listening. But I'll give everybody one homework assignment that I think at this point, hopefully we've earned the right to ask. If you have been listening to the podcast and you do like it, share it with one friend, just one friend. Try to find somebody in your network that you think would enjoy listening to this. If you have found it enjoyable, that's my ask for the week. Just share it with one friend. But thanks for listening.
I will share it with my one friend, which means you're getting a text from me, Justin, to check out Mostly Humans podcast.
Excellent. I'm going to get a text to listen to myself. I love that. But thanks as always, guys. Until next week, appreciate all of you. Thanks for tuning in.
See ya.